Welcome to the literary program of South Asian Heritage Month, and we are joined tonight by Nikesh Shukla, who is our literary patron. Thank you so much for joining us, Nikesh. How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you? I was just singing Republica before we went on.
It was brilliant. It was great. I'm sad that you all missed it, really. You missed quite the show. Thanks so much for being part of this whole month. It's been a real pleasure to have you on board. And just before we get started as well, you have curated an event for us that you're going to be sharing on Friday, haven't you?
Yes.
Tell us about it. Yes. It's a mystery. You will never know.
Okay, so for anyone who is watching this and you are a writer and you want to spend some time with the biggest, baddest writers in town, they're all busy, but no, I'm joking. One of the things that I really love having conversations with writers about is craft. And a lot of writers and I, we text about craft, we share articles about craft, we talk about craft all the time. And so one of the things I thought we could do for South Asian Heritage Month is do a craft panel. So I have asked Nikita Gill, the amazing poet and novelist, and Coco Khan, the journalist and essayist, and Nida Manzoor, the filmmaker and screenwriter, to basically do a panel with us. So we'll be talking about storytelling, basically building characters, story structure. It'll be a really technical panel event for you writers out there. Nida is obviously the creator of Lady Parts. We Are Lady Parts, which is an amazing Channel 4 show. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to see it. Coco Khan is a Guardian columnist. She was in The Good Immigrant. And Nikita Gill is a poet whose verse novel, The Girl and the Goddess, came out last year during the pandemic when lots of things happened, but I can't quite remember the dates. But they're all very dear friends of mine. And Nikita and I actually ran an Instagram live during lockdown every Monday where we would just talk about writing craft and technique, and it was loads and loads of fun and really informative for lots of people. So I thought, why not try and replicate that for South Asian Heritage Month? So I've got these cool dudes together. That was a long plug.
That was a great plug, my goodness. And it's such a treat as well for us to have like so many heavy hitters all together in one place, and there's so many different facets of writing and storytelling with this lineup. It's great. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so like what I'm really excited about is to basically talk about the commonality between all of our writing, like between all of the things that we write, but also couch that within the specificity of the different forms that we write in. Nida's a filmmaker, I am a fiction writer, Coco is a journalist, and Nikita is a poet, but we all have so many, like thematically and structurally, we cross over in so many different ways.
Incredible stuff. But we are here to talk about you specifically and your decade-long career in publishing, and the way that you've actually as well, you've moved across genres, you've moved across different functions and roles within publishing, not just as a writer, but as an editor as well, and then screenwriting also. And there's so many different hats that you've had to wear throughout your career. And I think that's what makes you rather special in terms of just the longevity of your career, first of all, as a writer, but the fact that you've been able to move between so many different functions. Is that something that you always had your eye on, or did you want to just write one type of, or commit yourself to one type of work and things just worked out this way?
I always saw myself as a comedy writer. Like I knew I really wanted to write fiction, and I really wanted to write for teenagers, and I really wanted to write TV, but it was always comedy. That, comedy is my first love. Like I grew up on sitcoms. I inhaled stand-up comedy albums as a teenager. I've just been a big fan and studier of comedy. My first two novels are comedy novels. I had a comedy lab on Channel 4 in 2011. And when I was planning to write for teenagers, I wanted to write funny books that would make boys laugh, because I think that's a really hard thing to do. And boys also statistically don't read as much as girls when it comes to reading for pleasure as a teenager. And I thought, if I can make boys laugh, then maybe I can write some stuff for them. And so that was my first love. But then racism happened. But then like I found myself kind of pivoting more towards I guess a non-fiction voice with The Good Immigrant, and also those first two YA books. Just the things that I wanted to write at the time were quite genre heavy, so they're quite serious. My third YA, which I'm currently working on at the moment, it's not been announced yet, so I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but it's basically a comedy novel, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's always been about using jokes, making people laugh, and that being the central driver of the stories that I wanted to tell. Like, I've written this memoir. It's a funny memoir. Like, the thing that I think is most enduring about The Good Immigrant is that it's quite a funny book. It's a surprisingly funny book. I think that the fact that we try and bypass people's brains and make them laugh is the thing that has made that book endure. Because my thing was, while we were writing about painful things and horrible things and things that we had experienced that we wanted to process, my thing was always push for a joke. You don't have to always push for pain, push to make us laugh. And I think that made a bunch of those essays really funny, because there's something quite unifying in that. So yeah, comedy has always been there as a part of who I am, and I'm really glad that pretty much all of the projects I'm working on are funny projects.
They absolutely are. And I think it's one of the things as well that allows you to deal in quite heavy and dark themes, and particularly with Run Riot and the one who wrote Destiny, that what I've noticed, and I wanted to ask you if this was a deliberate narrative tool that you use, but health is also a character in these books, the loss of agency through health, and particularly how it affects and impacts these young people and their lives, and dealing with something that's that heavy and that, and it's such a real world finality, and it's something that we all have to deal with at some point, but balancing that with the humor of it, it is such a, they're almost symbiotic. One could not exist without the other. And is it a deliberate tool that you use in terms of when health is a character in the book to communicate loss of agency? Is that something that you find that you weave into the story when it's particular to what kids are going through, when a younger audience is going through that? Is that something that you deliberately put in front of the reader as one of life's challenges, or was that just how the story unfolded when you were writing both of those books?
Yeah, not intentionally, but I love that you see that. I think, the one who wrote Destiny is very much me trying to process cancer, terminal cancer. It's me reckoning with my mum's death, and something that crops up in my work a lot. It's just something that looms large in my life. Like, the grief has haunted me for the last 10 years, and with, I guess, The Boxer, my second YA, I wanted to talk about the mental health implications of a racist attack. I wanted us to start with the racist attack and have it be over very quickly, and I wanted us to then sit in Sonny's head for the rest of the novel as he processes this horrific thing that's happened to him. But the thing with those YA books is, I'm a youth worker. I've been a youth worker for years, as well as a writer. And at the time, I was working on a youth project where I was working with young people to help them find their voices and tell stories. And I would always farm out books to all of them. Like, all the time I'd be getting books and I'd be like, I'll read this, I think you'd really like it, and stuff. And I quickly found that, like, because I was able to curate these books for them, they were reading more than they would have done. And it just sort of occurred to me that there weren't necessarily books being written with teenagers from Bristol in mind. And so I thought, well, given that I'm working on an issue-based magazine with young people to create content about the issues that are important to them, why don't I just look at my own magazine and see what they're talking about? Because when we'd first set up the magazine, I was like, Oh yeah, you know, like there'll probably be like Minecraft reaction videos and memes and like fun stuff. But actually, the first piece that was turned in for the magazine was about the gentrification of an area that I live just on the edge of, an area called Stokes Croft in Bristol, and how someone who had grown up in Stokes Croft St Paul's had gone to sit in a cafe and write, and then she was charged £3.75 for a lemonade. She's like 17 when she wrote this piece, and she was so outraged. She wrote a piece about this, and I was like, damn, like going back to that very first piece that was written for the magazine. This is what's important to these guys, and like housing was a real issue, mental health was a real issue, and so like I I wasn't like exploiting like what was in front of me. Instead, I was just like, these are things that really matter to young people. I don't know how many YA writers or teen writers in the UK get to really experience what's important for young kids who aren't in London, who because like a lot of YA authors do brilliant school visits, but there are only certain, like not all schools necessarily have visits from a lot of these writers. So like how much are they kind of meeting different teenagers? Whereas I was meeting teenagers from all over Bristol, from all different walks of life and different backgrounds, because we were going out into different areas, and we were working with different youth projects and so on and so forth. And so I had access to all these amazing minds. And so that's where Run Riot came from, was just housing was really important to these guys. The way Bristol was changing to accommodate people who were moving out of London, which then I then had to reckon with the fact that I was said guy who was moving out of London, and like like that's the reason a bunch of estates were being, people were being moved out of estates, and those estates being turned into posh flats and stuff. So yeah, like those first two books were real love letters to that youth project and to those kids that I was working with.
That's incredible. And that's probably why I think it's resonated with so many people, because it's actually born out of what kids care about and what they've been saying and what they've actually been writing about as well. There's a lot of power in the fact that you're echoing back what's been put down to paper, and what's actually poured out of somebody, that they've taken the time to go, this matters enough for me to launch it into the ether. That's how much it matters, and reflecting that back to them is so important. And I think that's why there's such a visceral quality to a lot of your a lot of your work in general for me, but particularly the YA stuff. I remember in our original video, you were saying I write YA for kids, and I don't write it for like adults that want to feel like 20-year-olds that want to feel like kids again. But however, I would argue that like as a 30-something, like I love your YA books. Like I really love them, because there's a visceral quality to all of your work. But when you're writing into childhood, the way that you temper that visceral quality and then write into childhood, it's a really, really beautiful balance that you strike. And approaching that from an adult gaze, it's a really lovely thing. It's a lovely thing to dive into and see the two things at play, to see something so raw and visceral, and to see these huge themes like death and sickness and gentrification and all of these things that are crowding in on the world of children, that are real life things. They're not imagined monsters, but they are monstrous themselves. And but to see it handled with such care and delicacy, and it's a lovely thing. It's a really lovely thing to witness.
Yeah, thank you. And what I'm really like, when I was took the decision to finally write a book for teenagers, part of me was like, what can I do that's different? How can I play? Like what can I put in my bag of sweets and like just play, and I thought, well, I've never written a thriller before. And so those two books are thrillers, and they're both told in very specific ways that play with time. Actually, this one that I'm writing at the moment, which I have to hand in September, which is like a straight up comedy about someone trying to find themselves. It's very conventional, but it's just very funny. So like, you know, I'm playing about with voice there. And one of the things that I really love about writing YA is like I'm creating this sort of micro universe of Bristol, where each book is linked by a character. So like, you know, there's one character who crops up in one or two scenes in one book, who will then be the next character of the main character of the next one, and so on and so forth. And so the star of this book is someone who you meet in the Boxer, and there's someone who you will meet in this book who's going to be the main person in the next one, if I get to do another one.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah,
I love that. I love like little Easter eggs like that in the work. That's incredible. And very visual as well. I think it's fantastic. I was going to ask you a general question. So with this canon of work that you have, this huge body of work that you have, at what point did you like start looking in the mirror and like going, holy crap, this is who I am, this is what I do, and genuinely believing that you're a writer, like you are a writer?
You know, when I think back to 2009, and I think back to what I wanted in 2009, all I wanted in 2009 was to write a novel. And I wrote a novel. Like I didn't even think about it being published, and I didn't even think about getting to do it again, and I didn't think about then getting the opportunity to write a book that I tried to write when I was 19, and I didn't think, oh, maybe I'll write a non-fiction book, and then, oh, maybe I'll pitch to write a Spider-Man comic, or like any of this stuff. I just thought I want to write a novel, and I wrote a novel. So like everything has been bonus for me. Everything since finishing the manuscript for the book that I wrote before Coconut Unlimited, which is my first published novel, has been bonus. Because sure, you know, over those 10 years, like I've been playing about with what my voice is and what I want to say and how I view the world and what place I take up in the canon of British South Asian literature, or whatever that may mean. And like obviously dealing with like certain privileges that I possess and what that then means and how I then use those privileges for good.
Well, there's a bust of you at the helm of the ship. Did you not know that?
Oh my god! I bet it weighs the ship down because it's so fat.
Shut up.
Yeah, like self-deprecating. I don't know. Yeah, I had that moment like at some point last year. I just sort of I got the final copies in for Brown Baby, and I put it next to all of the books I've ever worked on, and I was like, wow, that's 10 years. That's a body of work. I now have a body of work. If I died tomorrow, and like the amount of stress I feel in my heart at the moment, I could very easily die tomorrow.
Don't say that.
Like I would be happy with the body of work that I've created, you know?
Yeah.
I got to write for teenagers. I've been acknowledged for my work by my peers, by various establishments that I respect and establishments that I don't respect, like thousands of readers. And like I did a book like The Good Immigrant that people still find for the first time every week and message me or tweet me or tag me into an Instagram post or send like generously send me an email through my website saying that it's a book that's changed their life. And like all I want to do is write a novel, so all of this is just bonus. Like I feel like I'm at a party. Like it's and like yeah, there are still like things that annoy me, or certain things don't go my way, or like I might pitch for a project and not get it, or like, you know, I might sell a book and not be the 100 million billion pound advance that I was hoping for because I'm super realistic expectations. But when it comes down to it, I did the thing I set out to do, and that is more than enough. And so everything else has just been bonus.
I think that's a really beautiful way to look at it as well, because it's like really what this boils down to for you. And you've said this a lot, like if you say this whenever I've spoken to you about it, that like it's just you just want to write. It's just about writing, and that's where the joy of it is. It was never about accolades, and it was never really about influence, and it was never really about all of the other things that actually quite a lot of other people crave when they embark on this sort of journey. It's a journey that encapsulates other trappings of majesty, you know, and for you it's just like, I just want to write, like that's what I want to do. And I think that's why it works, and that's why this body of work is there, and that's why it's so successful.
I think it's like, just to kind of break that down a little bit, an exercise I do with writers, an intention setting exercise I do with writers, is to identify why they're writing the thing that they're writing and why they're writing it now. Because I often think that a project, a writing project, be it an essay, be it a book length thing, or be it a poem, it comes from a place of us wrestling with something, you know, us wrestling with an idea or a question or a theme, or like something at our core that we're trying to resolve. And so as long as we're able to identify what it is that makes us sit down and show up at the empty Word document or the empty page, then that's what really counts. And like, each time I've written a book, it's because I've got something to say about the thing that I'm writing about, or it's been a particular concern of mine. And I think that, I guess this is just like advice to any writers who are watching this. Like, when you sit down to write your book, just be really clear on why you're writing it, what you're writing, why you're writing it now, and who you're writing it for. Like, I don't think we do enough work on who our intended readers are. Because I think the automatic assumption is like, oh, it's just for everyone. It's for anyone who wants to read it. I want to sell millions of copies and whatnot. But like, who is this for? Who needs to read this? And sometimes breaking it down and going, well, you know, this YA book, this third one that I'm writing in particular, it is specifically for my youngest cousin when she was 16 years old, and she wanted to perform, but she just was just so undone by her own confidence issues, and I just wasn't there for her enough at the time, because I was in my early 20s and I was doing my own thing by that point. And sure, she's in her mid 20s now, or late 20s now, but there'll be other ones, like other people like her out there, and that's my intended reader. Like, and sometimes I break it down that specifically, and that tells me exactly what this book needs to do, because I know who it needs to move, you know?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, yeah, you write it for yourself. Sometimes you write it for yourself now. Sometimes it's the question that you're reflecting on now. Sometimes it's you way back when, and that's okay. But I think being really clear about who you're writing for is really important.
And it's the quickest way, I think, and the most effective way to find your voice. And I think a lot of people lose that, and then everything becomes really convoluted. So what I was going to ask you as well, and this dovetails quite beautifully with it, is that you always, like, you're always helping people to develop their craft. You're always helping people and offering advice. And I know that you've got your newsletter as well that was helping people write novel. And it literally was like going through stages of, hi, we're going to write a book together, and I'm going to be with you throughout this entire process, and I'm not asking for anything in return. Let's go. And it was one of the most extraordinary things that you just don't see other writers do. And it was about helping people develop and hone their craft, helping them practically move through the bones and marrow of their story, and helping that get to a place where they had a finished product. And the way that I met you was years ago, when I was writing a blog, and I was like, hi, will you be my brown Obi-Wan Kenobi and read my stuff? And you were like, yeah, sure, cool, why not? And it was just, it floored me completely, because the kindness with which you approach and nurture people that are just developing what they do, particularly from like the BIPOC community where there is this hideous imposter syndrome and hideous sense of feeling othered, and like these spaces just aren't for you or anyone that looks like you or anything you have to say or anything that you produce. It's an extraordinary thing. Where does that come from?
The thing is, I don't know if it is extraordinary. It's just what you do, right? Like, I've met so many writers who take themselves out of the running before the industry has, and that pains me. And I am here because I am here, and I've had the career I've had because of the generosity of others, the generosity of time and space and nurturing and advice and a shoulder to cry on, and editorial advice, or just like a kick up the butt. Like, where would I be without Courtier Newland and Rajiv Balasubramaniam and Nia Equai Parks commissioning a short story from me and editing me properly, and me going, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to sound like. And then bringing me into a community where I felt like I was a peer with Leonie Ross and Kamala Shamsi and Ramesh Gunasekara and all of these amazing writers when I was like in my, 24, 25? And where would I be without Nivin Govindan, who was like, read this book. He gave me a copy of Sag Harbor by Colson Whitehead. And that's the moment I started Coconut Unlimited, because I was like, this is the voice that I've been looking for all this time. But Niven was always like, oh, have you spoken to this person? Oh, you should meet this person. Oh, come with me to this thing. Or Selena Godin, who was like, look, so much of voice is like just trying things out again and again. Here's some stage time. Here's some more stage time. Here's some more stage time. Show up, write a new piece, figure out what you want to say. And I went to Book Club Boutique and I performed like every other week at Book Club Boutique for the 2 years that it ran. And like I wrote a lot of stinky stuff, but like I found my voice by the end of it, And all of these people took their time. They didn't have to do any of that for me, and they did, because that's what you do. When you're marginalized in an industry, you kind of look out for each other. And so like I can't pay any of them back. Sure, I can talk about them and celebrate what they did for me and like celebrate their work when it comes out and try and like talk about the impact that they've had on my life, but I can't pay them back. That time that they took of me is priceless, but I can pay it forward. And also, like, I had I know this is like a weird thing to say, but I had the privilege of going to private school for a bit, and I understand that privilege is meaningless if you don't use it for good. And I had a mother who was very, very, like, the idea of seva, of like service to your community, was incredibly important to her. And so like all of that just means that it's important to me that I make sure that the path is clear for people, because I've had some like barriers in my career. Like the path to publication for my first novel wasn't easy. The path between my first and second novel wasn't easy. Burned a lot of bridges doing The Good Immigrant. People weren't exactly knocking down my door for a bunch of things, but like I've been lucky and I've been privileged, and I wouldn't want anyone to face the barriers that I've faced, which has often been about things that aren't to do with the writing. And I've done, the writing's always good. So that's why I do it, man. I don't know if anyone's watching this, but like, and this is an exclusive for you guys.
They
but
are,
like,
I can see them.
like 3 people. Hi, Mum. Hi, Dad. Mum, why are you watching this? You're dead. So like, to the writers out there, I think this will be announced tomorrow. But I started working at the Faber Academy, because I really like teaching, and having been someone who has always been like critical of like expensive courses in the past, but also like I do enjoy teaching, and I also like paying bills and stuff like. And I really love the Faber Academy, but I understand that it is a privilege to be able to go on the Faber Academy because it costs money. So I started my own scholarship there. I will be paying for a free place on each of the courses I do from my own pocket. I pay for it. I also put in a travel budget so people can get to and from the courses, which are in central London. And that will be the first one. Will be from like the course starting in October. which is like, it's just what you do, right?
Mm.
Just what you do. Like, I would expect any of the writers I've ever helped to go and do this for other writers,
Yeah.
because like, it's just what you do.
It's like, it's a familial thing as well. And I feel like it's a cultural thing too. Like I think as a culture, we've always been socialized to behave in a manner that if you're going up the ladder, you turn around and pull people up behind you. You don't like pull it up and do a Margaret Thatcher, like you just, it's
I,
what you
I,
do.
I would disagree slightly with this, because I think the other thing that I'm reacting to is when you are, like, traditionally the various creative industries that I worked in, they have allowed, and I'm using air quotes here,
Mm,
allowed like one or two people from marginalized backgrounds through, and they make everyone fight for those scraps, and so you end up being incredibly competitive with
mm,
the other brown person in the room or the other person of color in the room, and that's not how it should be. There's space for all of us,
exactly.
and
Equality is not a finite resource.
exactly. And so where I've noticed that in the past, or where like I've had moments where I've gone, oh my god, there's another brown person, I feel very uncomfortable, and then I've had to kind of interrogate that within myself. Like, certainly, like, it happened to me like very early on in my career, but like, I don't want that to be how we come through. So that's why I do all of this stuff, is because I want to make sure people know there's space for loads of us, and
Mm,
none of us are unicorns.
exactly. And it's about, I think that there's definitely an access barrier, and I've always found it so strange that on these programs where and it's always a BME program where all of the stories and all of the perspectives of people that straddle multiple cultures that fall under that canopy of BME fight for this one tiny window that will accept like 4 people a year. And I found that so bizarre as a concept. And it is, everyone is pitted against one another, where uh, I just find that really, really strange, such a strange dichotomy. It seems like it's upended and logically it doesn't make sense at all. One thing I wanted to ask you as well was, would you like to do a reading for us?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, just before that as well, if you have questions and comments for Nikesh, there's a couple that have come through. I'll put them on the screen, but do feel free to ask questions, and we will take them. We will take them in a bit.
Cool. So I'm going to read a short passage from, I don't know where the camera is, from my Memoir Brown Baby. I'm just going to read from the start. Okay, I'm going to read from the start. How to bring you into the world. I never considered becoming a parent myself until my mum died. I'd like to think there was a moment when the switch flicked on, or the force field came down, or the upgrade happened between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. plugged into a power source, Wi-Fi switched on. There was nothing like that. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no tearful staring out over a field of bluebells, no Proustian cake-chewing revelation, and no need to cement my legacy. You didn't appear to me in a dream. I didn't read a saccharine poem about inheritance. I didn't hold a friend's baby and have the final big chorus of Barry Manilow's "Looks Like We Made It" erupt in my head. You just arrived. 1 minute, your mum and I were getting drunk at Christmas, and the next, there you were in my arms, asleep. Your clenched fists covering your face much like they did on the ultrasound. Your nails were long, your eyes were closed. You looked just like her, just like Mum. Maybe it was a trick of my imagination, or a sleep-deprived, adrenaline-fueled tether to bring you into the family. Maybe you just sort of look like Mum in the way babies and old people are indistinguishably vole-like in certain lights. I tried to capture it on my camera, but you know how photographs capture moments and never the narratives that prescribe them. Some photographs lack intent. Others capture fragments, and only you can zero in on the history of that moment. Everyone else can just see the vole baby with her claws over her face. I look at it now, and that photo of you looks like you and not like her. My mind was playing tricks on me in those early moments, because when I first took in your face, all I could see was my mum. It was like she was alive again and I was whole. The quick camera phone photo I took when I checked it hours later on the toilet, because this was the only sanctum left. How wrong I was, I have no sanctum. In the maelstrom of your first day on Earth, where I could justify looking at my phone, it looked nothing like what I thought I'd captured. It looked like you, and not her. The photo was of your face, a new entry, something I'd not seen before, someone I'd not yet met, a stranger. And yet when I walked back into the bedroom and saw you asleep on your back in your mother's arms, the only light coming from the landing, I saw it again. I saw her in you. Were you her reborn? I shook the thought from my head. How could I project onto a baby the blankest of canvases my own grief? How unfair. And when you cried, I took you in my arms and went into another room. I stood in the window and swayed from side to side. The curtains were open and I looked out into the windows of the flats behind our house. The man with the beard was washing up, as he always seemed to do. In the window below him, two people I'd never seen before were holding onto a bowl, moving it in a slow, controlled, ceremonious circle. The guy who had his window open every single day, all year round, for unknown reasons that drove me crazy with speculation, had his window open. I say none of this so you think I'm a creep who spends his time staring into other people's homes. I say this so you know that in that moment, as I stared down at you, trying to take stock of the fact that my entire world had changed, my life was on a new course, everything around us was exactly as it should be. The world continued to turn and not move to the beat of just one drum, and that grounded me. It stopped me freaking out. Thank you. Brown baby. Did you see the moment I was really thrown when you disappeared?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's the Shukla show now.
I forgot to say I was removing myself from the stream, and I was like, "Oh, you can't hear me when I'm in the green room." And I was like, "Okay, he'll figure it out. It'll be fine." But yes, do buy this. It is beautiful. It's really, really, really beautiful.
Yeah. The first like 2 paragraphs of that reading were ropey because I was like, where's the passion going?
Live broadcast, everyone. I do apologize. But this is what I mean when we talk about your work being visceral, and particularly this memoir. This is like a raw nerve, and it is in the best possible way, and it is as searing as it is funny, and it's an incredible thing, and it's a beautiful thing. Why now?
Why now? Why write this book now? Good question. Yeah, I didn't plan to write a memoir. When I was approached by my editor, I was a bit like, I'm 38, dude. Like, who writes a memoir at 38? And also, like, my parenting journey wasn't particularly traumatic or tragic or out of the ordinary. Everything was as it should be. And so I had to think about why now. And just to kind of bring you back a little bit. So in 2016, I put out The Good Immigrant, and that blows up. And I'm then touring the country talking about race for a living, which is a very strange thing to happen. And I just found those years very difficult for various reasons. I just had a kid. I was on trains a lot. I was lonely. I was like isolated. I was performing trauma for middle-class white people at literary festivals, or like
just tap dancing away.
And like the things that would happen would be like I would talk about race and racism and Brexit, because it was always about Brexit, and then someone in the audience would share their story of racism, and I would have to hold that because they'd very generously shared that story with me, and then someone else in the audience without fail would kind of go, well, this is all nonsense, this isn't racism. And the other panelists, the other contributors to the book got to stay in hotels and decompress and like hang out and kind of go like just be a crew together and go, that was a weird experience. Whereas I would be on a train back to see my kids and I would just be decompressing by myself on the train. And it just threw me into a depression. And
It's a lot to hold.
yeah, and around that time, I wrote a piece for the Pool about my kid refusing to play with a brown doll because she said it looked dirty, and I was sort of really puzzled and troubled by that experience. And I tried to like interrogate it in this essay. I was approached by the Observer magazine, the editor of the Observer magazine really liked that essay that I'd written and wondered if I had more parenting columns in me. And I said I didn't really want to write about race anymore. I wanted to write about joy. And so the thing that we worked out was that I'd write a column where like I'd be asking the question, how do we get our kids to be joyful and boundless in a world that feels so heavy, that I feel so sad and angry about? That was like the premise of the column. And when the column ended, I was approached by this editor saying, I really liked that column. I thought you were doing some really great stuff and you were just sort of finding your voice. Is there a longer piece in this? And my initial reaction was like, I don't have a memoir in me. But that question was still an important question. It still is an important question. How do we raise our kids to be joyful and boundless in a world that feels so sad and angry, that I feel, it feels so bleak that I feel so sad and angry about? Like whether we think that the world is bleak, like, part of the importance of asking the question is to hear people go, I think you're being a bit pessimistic there. Or part of it is to have people go, yeah, no, this is how I manage it. Or part of the question is to go, oh, I'd never seen that, thought about it like that before. So, it's a question with many answers and many spirals and many loops and many ways of looking at it. And so that became the way I wrote the book. And so it just became a book about now, like, how are we doing this, guys? Like, how do we talk to all of our kids, not just brown kids and black kids, about racism? How do we talk to all of our kids, not just daughters, about the patriarchy? How do we talk to all of our kids about how we have effed the world up through mass consumerism and fossil fuels and cars and whatever, like all of it, convenience ruined the world. How do I tell my kids why I feel so sad all the time? All of those things, like, they were very pertinent questions, and the more I explored them, the more I realized they were questions that a lot of other parents were thinking about. And if they weren't thinking about them, I was like, why aren't you thinking about this? And so that writing it became about making the very act of asking the question an important one.
And you've since gone on to do the Brown Baby podcast as well, because in reading of this, there is so much that you've said, and it feels like it could go on forever, and in the best possible way. It's just
it really goes on.
but you whiz through it, like, and I'm just like, no, I want more. Like, I want more stuff. Tell me about more things. Tell me how to fix things. I want more things. And it was just, as someone that doesn't have children and isn't going to, like, I'm obsessed with this, because I'm thinking of my 2-year-old niece, and this is how I want to explain the world to her. This is the world that I want to reflect back to her. The fact that you did that list from the Good Men project that is meant to be this wholesome list of how we should treat our daughters and what we should say to them, and you're like, this is problematic for the following reasons, and that kind of stuff matters. It matters enough that you've considered it and thought about it, and that you've deconstructed it as well. And I was going to ask you about the doll, because it just made me so sad reading about it. And when you were saying, when you picked her up from nursery, and then when you were telling her that brown is beautiful, and the fact that that there was the white doll and then there was the brown doll, and the white, they both sort of got neglected in their own way, but it was the brown doll that was always stuffed in something. The brown doll was always hidden, and that is the coded messaging that we all grew up with, and that is the implicit understanding that who we are and what we look like is implicitly lesser, and that imprints on children in a way that we don't have language for, and so we see evidence of it everywhere. And to have that spoken about, and to have it spoken about in a way that is a love letter to your child, is a really, really powerful thing. It's an extraordinarily powerful thing. And I couldn't sing this book's praises any higher. Like, I just think it's an extraordinary piece of work, and I think it's your most visceral piece of work. And I think, yes, absolutely, a memoir at 38. I think you should write 3 more. I think you probably have 3 more in you. I think it's great.
What I think is funny about it all is, like, you realize how low the bar is for dads and for brown dads, right? It's like,
oh God, yes, yeah, 100%.
Because, like, I don't think I'm particularly special as a dad, or like particularly good at it. You know, I'm present and I care, and turns out that that's more than enough for brown dads, right? And you're like, oh my God, that is really tragic. And so, like, by documenting it, like, I don't want to paint myself out as a saint, or like I'm good at it, but like I want the vulnerability to be there, and I want the feeling that I don't have any answers to be there. But most importantly, I want to, like, it's like an ode to the soft brown dad, which we just don't see enough of, you know, which is me, you know.
There's a board book in there somewhere.
The soft brown dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a beautiful thing, and like, because it doesn't feel like self-aggrandizing at all. It feels there's so much vulnerability in it.
You should read some of the 2-star Amazon reviews. Oh my God, such a self-aggrandizing dad. Like, he thinks he's so perfect, blah blah blah.
Well, it's just utter nonsense. Like, because it is riddled with the realization that you are imperfect and that you want to get it right. So I don't think ever please online reviewers ever. No one's fully happy.
Well, like,
no one's fully happy with their takeaway. Why would they ever be fully happy with your book, you know?
Well, what I find frustrating about, like, the Goodreads Amazon experiences, like, you promise yourself you're not going to read them, and then on the days you're feeling low, you're like, I need someone to externalize the lowness I feel.
How can I murder my self-esteem?
Yeah. Well, like, it's easier when someone else does it for you, right? So, like, but like, there are so many times where I've read reviews and I've just been like, what's wrong with you, you moron? Like, there's a 1-star review for the Good Immigrant USA. Like, and you can tell because I memorized these, which is in and of itself is like, come on, Shukla, move on. But like, there's a 1-star review for the Good Immigrant USA because the guy bought the ebook when he meant to buy the audiobook.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
There's like a 1-star review for one of my novels because because the person was annoyed that they didn't learn enough about the British Empire. Like, buy Priyamvada Gopal's book.
But it's your job to educate him. It's your job.
It's a multi-generational family drama about cancer. Oh God, I didn't learn enough about what happened in 1847 in Amritsar. Like, no, Jesus. Go and read a history book. What is wrong with you? So, like, yeah, like, every now and then, like, someone will point out something that you sort of secretly think about yourself, but other times people will say stuff that's just nuts, and you're like, whoa, I don't know what to do with this. I mean,
it's bananas, isn't it?
Don't read them, but you know.
Just close the laptop. Just don't look at it. Go and have a G&T. That's always my advice. Close the laptop, have a G&T. I'm glad that you touched on this, though, that with Empire and everything. Can we talk about the MBE stuff?
Sure. Yeah, fine.
What went on there then?
I got an MBE. I said I don't want an MBE. That was it. That was literally
Love it. I loved your Instagram post about it, though, which was so succinctly put and so well put. A lot of people over-explain these things, but I think you just got right to the point. It was brilliant. I don't know if we're allowed to swear here. Possibly not.
Oh, I mean, I'm quoting the title of one of Inua Ellam's poems. Inua Ellam's wrote a collection of poetry called The Actual, which is an amazing collection of poetry, and each poem is called /something, and he wrote a cycle of poems called /Empire. It's the most incredible writing I've ever read. He's an astonishing poet. I love him so much. Yeah, so I just posted the title page of that basically, and
It's brilliant.
and a soundbite from a Mos Def song, which also has similar sentiments about the Empire. But then, you know,
so what happens in that process? Like, how do you have to formally decline one? What goes on?
They send me a form, and I.
Oh, it's a form. I thought it was just like an email, or maybe there was a footman with a velvet pillow you had to shoo away. I don't know how this works.
Well, you know, like in the like noughties, when you download job application forms that were done in Word using like all those different tables and cells,
Oh
and then
God,
like
yeah.
when you did the personal statement, if you went too long, it like messed all the formatting up and stuff like that, and you could never get it right, especially when you had like the tick box and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, and it never aligns. Yes, 100%.
It was one of those forms.
Oh,
yeah.
That's really disappointing.
Super high tech form designed by the Prime Minister's office. Yeah, like I got an email. I said no, thank you, and then I told my dad, and he understood. And then later on, he was like, "I think you should reconsider." But I think thing is that hour that email came in, I had been sent an email from a teacher just saying she's been reading The Boxer with a kid who has been excluded, and hold on one second. I'm really sorry to do this. You're gonna have to.
That's fine. That's fine. No. Don't worry about it. I am going to. This is back to Brown Baby, everybody. But I'm going to read a little bit that Nikesh wrote about his mother because I thought it was very beautiful, and I was going to ask him about it earlier. And he said, I wish you had known my mum, Ganga. She's trod this tightrope between cultural norms and progressiveness with an interesting balance, and it allowed her to exist in many different environments and never compromise who she was or what she thought of the world. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing and a really beautiful theme about the strength of women. And I was going to ask you about that. I don't know how much you heard.
No, I heard nothing. Sorry. You know, we are still in a pandemic, guys. Make sure you get your vaccines, and also like
do get your vaccines.
Sometimes deliveries happen.
Sometimes they happen. I was just I was reading a quote about your mum in the book that I thought was rather beautiful. And it just said, I wish you'd known my mum, Ganga. She trod this tight rope between cultural norms and progressiveness with an interesting balance, and it allowed her to exist in many different environments and never compromise who she was or what she thought of the world. And I thought that was rather beautiful. And I thought, particularly this book, I keep going back to it because I love it, but this book in particular, I thought was just a love letter to the women in your life. And it's very rare that when we have men writing, particularly from our community, that center the narrative around the women and the strength of women in their own memoir.
Yeah, that was intentional. It was intentional. Like, I don't necessarily think that in my first book, my first novel, I was kind as the author to the female characters, and that always stayed with me, that I'd failed the female characters in that book. And it's been really important to me ever since to make sure I don't do that again. And yeah, when I sat down to write the memoir, I was like, these are the most important people who made me who I am, and who are the reason these are the things I'm going to pass on to the next generation.
And even when you talk and write about food, and even when you've written about food outside of this, when you're talking about the memory of your mother as well, and have food as an anchor point to all of these things, it's always such a strength and power in the women who've raised you and the women that you love in your life. It's an extraordinary thing. I wanted to ask you, but only if you're comfortable, so you can tell me to bog off if you want to. When you write into grief and when you write into loss, do you find it cathartic, or do you find it just incredibly difficult and painful but necessary?
Catharsis is an interesting word, though,
Mm.
because I think the implication of catharsis is like a finiteness, like a closure. Something has closed.
It doesn't end, does it?
I think people can sometimes conflate catharsis and closure. They're like, but yeah, like a release happens when you build everything up and you put all of your blood on, you spill all of your blood onto the page. Yeah, like definitely a release happens. But I think a writer who puts a lot, like who bleeds on the page, I sometimes don't hold that 10% back for myself that I need to. Like I just did a really interesting in conversation with Michelle Zorna, who performs as Japanese Breakfast, one of the coolest dudes in the world, man. She wrote a memoir called Crying in H Mart, which is about grieving for her mum and food, which is Shukla catnip. And yeah, her mum always said, keep 10% of yourself back. And I don't think I ever do that. And so I think I can sometimes end up in a bit of a free fall, like writing this stuff, but it needs to be that way.
Yeah. It's the way, that's the way that it can be communicated. That's the way it gets out. But it's like, God, it's brutal. Like it's brutal not to reserve some of it for you.
Yeah.
It's a brutal thing. For
Maybe
me,
I'll
it's
go back.
music and like Kawali music and then classical music for my dad. And then it has to, like, it is a physical feeling where there's nothing I can do but to write. And then it's just out. And then it's the expunging of it is not the resolution of it. It is not something that ever ends. And it is what you said about it moving through time. And there was a beautiful passage in here about your daughters running towards you and the pool, them being two little stones that this ripples around. It was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And this is something that time is not affected by. It is constant. And I think people think that this is linear. There's a start point and then there's an end point. And there's a point where I think people that haven't gone through it, they can understand you to a point where they're like, okay, now I don't get it. Why are you not okay? I don't understand. And for people that have, it's like you've been shunted into a multiverse where everyone is acting like everything is fine and nothing is fine, and you have to then carry on with normal life. And the only way I've been able to describe it to people is like, have you read Death Note? Okay, well, there's these like big death gods that that if you've touched the book, that will just be like, "Hi, I'm a death god," and they follow you around, and then and you can see them, and you can't ever unsee them, and they follow you around, but they are horrific and terrifying and huge and here, and after a while, the horror of them, of what they are, disappears. But they're always there, and then you try to carry on with normal life, and then you'll turn around and be like, "Oh God, it's right there! It's pants, I forgot that it's there." And it's one of the, it's something like that. You are forever altered and it will forever be part of your reality. But just because the shock and the horror of it has altered, just because you're acclimatizing, it doesn't mean that the gravity of it has changed and the hole that it blows in your life has changed. And I think we don't, as a society, have a language for that unless you meet other people who have, and you've got that war veteran, look in your eye, and you're just like, great. And it's one of those things. And to have, and it's when you read searingly beautiful one-liners like that it just cuts to the bone. But it's never in a way where you feel barged in on. And a friend of mine, Maya Kalari, she's written about her mother dying when she was 9, and she's written beautiful collection of poems called Half Woman, Half Grief. And like, you just sit there and read it in a one shot, and it's just incredible, so visceral and so beautiful, but you don't feel barged in on. And it's really hard to do this in a way where people don't feel barged in on when they've gone through it too. So I applaud you for that. I genuinely do, because it's a really, it must be a difficult thing to write into yourself. But as somebody reading it that's lost a good couple of loved ones in a very short space of time, it doesn't invade any trauma that you have. It's very lightly and very gently presses a hand on your shoulder, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I'm going to put my goggles on because I'm a little blind and there are lots of things coming up here. So, here we go. What have we got? Such a beautiful book. And oh, that's lovely. That is lovely. And this is Saz. Saz is lovely too. We have Sunita. Everyone is just singing your praises. This is wonderful.
Oh, thanks, gang.
General hype. Excellent interview. Yes, that's my friend Michael. Love you, buddy. You're brilliant. Brilliant. Love that. Gita, such a lovely conversation. And having read his YA books, I agree they are wonderful. Given Nikesh's screenwriting talents, any adaptations in the works? Oh, very briefly, before we touch on this, can you tell us how you made Himesh Patel famous, please?
I think he was already famous.
No, I know, I'm joking.
So I inadvertently got him his part in Yesterday, which is pretty cool.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, I wrote a short film with my collaborator Sam Masood, and we really wanted to write a rom-com with like a hot brown guy as the lead, and I wrote it with Himesh in mind because I think Himesh is really funny, and when he was Tamwa on EastEnders, his comic timing was just impeccable. And I was like, Himesh is going to play this guy, and he was like, Tamwa from EastEnders. I was like, trust me. And then Himesh came into audition. He was like, I see what you mean. And Himesh was amazing in this short film we made called Two Doses, and it won a film festival that Danny Boyle judged. He was on the judging panel, and he cast Himesh in Yesterday off the back of it, which is really cool. Obviously, Himesh was one of the essayists in The Good Immigrant. He's just my boy. He's a really good friend. In terms of adaptations in the works, I can't talk about it. I've signed NDAs. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but something's happening.
It's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's what
Gita, there's a big secret. There's a big secret. Something is happening, and we're not allowed to know what it is. Where are we? Beautiful and moving reading. Oh. Cubby. Oh. Yeah, Gita's just gone. Exciting. Love that. Good Immigrant was a game changer. Yes, it was. It was a game changer. I was going to ask you about what it's like to be diversity and inclusion guy, but you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, because that kind of, I think, changed the perception of who you were in the eye of the public, I think.
I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be diversity and inclusion guy. Diversity and inclusion is like a corporatized thing. All I wanted was more books by brown people. That's all I want. It's not that big an ask.
Less talk of dying, though, please, Jesus.
Yeah, so, it was like a bit. I was a bit morbid when we first started. I think, yeah. I think Natasha and I had a very, very like bonkers chat just before the went on, where we covered a lot of ground about a lot of different things, but there was like a strange morbid energy because I've had a hard day, guys. There's been a lot going on, and I just came in with weird energy. I'm sorry about
that. Brilliant. What else was I going to say? Oh yes, in terms of like being diversity and inclusion person and then not wanting to have to be the mouthpiece for all of those things. The Good Journal, and so I moved house and I've lost issue 3, but like I did get them all and I had the bag and everything. Excellent stuff. And the Good Literary Agency. Was this like, well, I wanted to ask what the impetus behind it was, but it seems very clear what the impetus behind it was. But was this the actionable and tangible way to sort of create something that was meaningful and to push back against all of this, just the wall of dirge around that time, in that whole 2016 to 2018 Brexit?
Well, I think it's because a lot of people kept expecting us to follow up the Good Immigrant with the Good Immigrant 2, and I just thought we'll just end up writing about race all the time, and that's useless. That's not the point of all of this stuff. And so doing the journal gave us an opportunity to publish writers, sometimes for the first time. You know, a lot of those writers have gone on to really interesting things, talking about stuff that wasn't about race and immigration, because not all writers of color do want to talk about that, you know. And the agency was also to kind of widen the conversation. So like we talked about race and class and sexuality and gender and neurodivergence and all of the underrepresented stories from marginalized communities that aren't being told in publishing. And so that was the impetus behind those things. Like the Good Immigrant gave me a window of clout to do some stuff, and so I did that stuff because I mean it, you know. Like I don't want to do all of this extra work. I just want to write, but I understand the responsibility that comes with the platform that I've been given, you know.
Peter Parker.
Something like that, yeah.
And just before we wrap up as well, who are the writers right now that you're reading that you're most excited about? And second question, what do you want to see more of? And third question, what do you want to see less of? Second question is an A and B. Oh, we've got more things.
Who are the writers?
Yeah, who are you most excited about?
So Kieran Tupper has just written this amazing memoir about being a youth worker in Brixton and knife crime called Cut Short that I really love. Sarvat Hassin has just written this most magical, dark, brilliant book called The Giant Dark, which is all about a musician and a poet who fall in love, and the dangers of obsession. It's like a retelling of Orpheus and Euripides.
Oh, nice.
Crying in H Mark by Michelle Zorna is really great. In the end, it was all about love by Musa Okwonga. It's like a really beautiful book about.
Yes, it is. It's very beautiful.
Love that book. And Natasha Brown's Assembly and Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. These are all books that I've loved this year so far. I did think, what was it? I had a thought.
I will put these on a list and I'll post them as recommendations.
Tamima Anum's The Startup Wife is brilliant and hilarious. And this one, Sky Day by Leonie Ross, is really great. I literally put a book down the other day and thought, I think when the end of the year comes, I will be telling people this is the best book I read. But stupidly, I can't remember what it is now. That's all. Can't have been that good if you can't even remember what it is, Shukla. Yeah.
If you find it, let me know and I'll put it on a thing and I'll share it. We have another question about fatherhood here, which is really interesting. Nikesh, as you say, the bar is set so low for fathers and men in general. With some of your writing aimed at young men, has your intention been to raise this bar for the next generation? You speak so plainly as this is just what you do, but it is tragically true that so many men have incredibly outdated, dare I say, unhealthy views and beliefs without even being aware that it is the case. That's a really good question, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Michael. Yeah, I think so much of what I'm trying to do is just normalize various things. And so like by just being really glib and going, it's just what you do. I want the message to be in the simplicity of that sentence. It is just what you do. It like, you know, whenever men it's referred to them doing childcare, like No, that's just being with your kids. You're not employed to do childcare for your kids. Or you know, when you know, you get brownie points for just showing up, whereas mums don't get afforded that. I just think it's really important to normalize the basic expectations of dads, which is pretty like the same same as mums, really. And so by normalizing it, I'm just sort of sending the message in the plainest terms that this is just what you do. And I think that's really important to me to kind of, you know, part of writing Brown Baby was about like honoring that epistolary tradition of writers like James Baldwin and Ta-Nehisi Coates, about that sort of the generosity of spirit of like reaching out to the next generation and holding their hand. And that's kind of what I see a lot of my work as. Maybe I'm not undermining, I don't feel like I'm undermining or underselling it by couching it in those terms. I hopefully just sort of being like, this is just what it is, you know.
It's really beautifully put. I'm so sorry, guys, we can't get to the rest of your questions. We've already run over, and but yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an absolute pleasure. It really has.
Thanks for
The room has had enough.
yeah. My lamp is like, wrap it up.
It's out. It's out, guys. The lamp is out. It's done.
No, thank you for having me. Thanks for putting together such an interesting lit program. And if you are watching this and you're a writer, make sure you watch us at 12:30 for a lunchtime craft chat with Nikita Gill
on Friday,
Coco Khan and Nida Manzoor. Friday.
It's going to be great. I will make sure that registration links are live tomorrow morning, and then you can jump on and register for that. It's going to be definitely not one to miss. And if you are a writer, like Nikesh says, working on your craft, this is for you. It's going to be extraordinary. Thank you so much for your time. I will let you get on with your evening. Thanks a lot, everybody. Happy South Asian Heritage Month. Bye.